For the last 20 years, I've spent a lot of time aligning consumer behavior with emerging technology and trying to figure out ways in which to drive business growth and results. And we can all agree that we're in this just constant state of change. When I used to speak, it used to be on the topic of disruption is the new normal. But what I've actually found over the last few years, it's more about an exponential acceleration versus disruption. It's not just about artificial intelligence and augmented reality and virtual reality as separate entities. What we're seeing is this kind of just massive acceleration towards convergence. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What we see is that culture is technology and technology is culture. So we're going to take a little journey today. And the filters I like to use when talking about emerging technology are empower, exponential, and enhanced. Empower is all about control and our expectation of control. And specifically, we're going to talk about Gen Z and their impact on emerging technology, because that's going to fundamentally shift and change how consumers interact and their expectations of technology. Exponential is all about intelligent systems and how this idea of ease and convenience is really what's going to drive mass adoption. So I've done a significant amount of proprietary research across generational cohorts, and we'll talk about the results of each of those. And finally, it's about enhanced. Enhanced is that connection of physical and digital driving towards simulation. So we're going to have a lot of fun talking about that. By the end of the talk today, I'm going to give you the actual date when we're going to be seeing multimodal interfaces at scale. That's voice, that's vision, and that's touch. Moving beyond desktop and mobile towards this idea of our environment adapting to us versus us inputting into technology. So that's kind of the wait for it moment at the end of the talk. So our journey today, we're going to have some fun. So this was all about passion. So you see a few of mine on the screen, from Star Wars to gaming, to Pixar movies, and ultimately, The Matrix. So this is going to be the lens in which we talk about each of these things. So if you're a sci-fi nerd like myself, you're going to really geek out on this presentation. If not, just pretend. It's okay. It's all right. It's a safe space. So before I talk about the future, I'd like to talk about the past. My very first movie ever in the late 70s, yes, I'm dating myself right now, was the original Star Wars. And I was just hooked from the word go. My friends, they wanted to be Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. I loved C-3PO and R2-D2. I loved how the technology in the Star Wars universe seemed to enable the characters every step of the way. And seeing that movie, I was like, wow, I can't wait till the time I've got my own R2-D2 kind of following me around, and I could talk to it, and it'll beep at me, and I'll understand what it's saying, right? So that was what I was waiting for. But growing up in the 80s, it wasn't really quite there yet. So we began to see hope in the 90s. We see the rise of mobile devices. And speaking of which, how many of you were rocking the Motorola Razr back in the mid-2000s? Yeah, show of hands here, show of hands. We're trying to text with that, the 3 numbers and 3 letters. Like, that was really, really rough. I'm telling you, really, really rough. But what happened then in 2007? What launched? iPhone, that's right. Heard other couple answers, well, it's okay. iPhone launched, and what happened? It was this consolidation of form factors, right? You had you had a camera, you had music, everything with a swipe interface. It was easy. And a lot of people thought that was transformational innovation. But the key thing to remember about innovation's about removing a barrier while building on the familiar. And what actually drove the mass adoption and ubiquity of the iPhone was actually the App Store. So when the App Store launched in 2008, that ability to democratize an ecosystem and allow third parties to create applications is what really began to drive the accelerated adoption. And that's a key thing to consider as you're evaluating new and emerging technology. The first thing I always look for is, how are third parties being allowed to build on top of whatever ecosystem it is? So that's a key point. Now we've had 180 billion apps that have been downloaded. But the key thing here is, there's a silent arms race happening right now about whether or not apps are going to remain relevant. Apple says yes, Google and Amazon say no. So we're going to get into that discussion and figure out what is actually going to happen from a native application perspective to everything becoming a middle tier service. So with that, we're going to start with Empower. So again, Empower is all about technology that allows us to feel like we're in control. All right, 4 topics here. We're going to talk about Gen Z. Gen Z is born 1996 to 2010. They're going to represent 40% of consumers by next year. 40%. And their expectations, especially around the camera, are going to fundamentally shift everything from commerce to how we actually create experiences, to how we actually gather data. So the second aspect here we're going to talk about is the lens is life. We're going to talk about and explore the evolving role of the camera and how that's going to eventually become a bridge to intelligence. And along the way, we're going to have a little discussion around private messaging and the shift from open social to private messaging as the primary way forward and the impact that that can have on commerce as well. So again, Empower is all about control. So we're going to start with my kids. First of all, everybody in the room, how many people have kids? Yeah? Yeah? All right. Mine just turned 17 yesterday, 14, and 11. And again, they're part of the first mobile-first generation. They learn to swipe before they learn to speak. And their expectations of entertainment experiences, how they communicate with their friends, significantly different than how I did. I'm assuming most of you as well. So as we begin talking about the behaviors, and I'm sure those of you with children can relate to this, the research shows that kids spend 2.5 hours a day with on-demand content. 2.5 hours. That's Netflix, that's YouTube as a remote control. Anybody agree with that sentiment in the room? Yeah? Yeah? Kids watching a lot of on-demand content, watching video streams? And one of the other ways in which the expectation, there's this idea of control, any Black Mirror fans in the audience? One in the back, one right there. Black Mirror launched an episode called Bandersnatch. And within that, it was a choose your own adventure. It was a non-linear path to an end result. And it was, again, allowing for this idea of control for the individual watchers. You could think about it like in the early 80s with the choose your own adventure books where you'd flip the quarter and you'd have to flip the book and go all sorts of different directions. We're seeing it now come to life even in the expectation around linear video. Most organizations create video assets, but they're not doing it in a way that's stitching it together, it's allowing for the consumer to control the experience. This is an example of an organization called WireWax, where they're putting contextual hotspots and they're able to create different branches of the content. So that again, it's allowing for this idea of control. It's this kind of faux personalization. The second thing is gaming. All right, how many of your kids are gaming right now? Yeah? All right. So this is my oldest son, Gavin, here. In his natural habitat, you can see that he's very excited that I'm sneaking in on him while he's streaming and taking a picture of him. So he's staying very well hydrated there as well. But the actual reality is, we need to get some of the neurogum that Brian was actually talking about. That would be great. But the actual expectation is, kids today are spending 1.5 hours a day gaming. And it's not just gaming, it's also creation of content as well. So the really funny story about this is he came to my wife and I about a year ago and said, Mom, Dad, we're looking at colleges. He's like, I want to be a professional esports athlete. You can imagine the reaction of my wife at the time when, one of your kids comes to you and says, he wants to be a professional gamer. But he's like, get this. It's athletics of the mind. And it's like a mic drop. And you can't argue that point, right? So it was really funny. It was a good time, but he's still working towards that. But it's a thing that we have to consider. And you heard it mentioned earlier as well, the role that esports plays. Esports is competitive gaming. So 100 million people watched the Super Bowl last year. 300 million people watched an esports championship last year. 300 million. The size and breadth of competitive gaming is incredibly large. The role that streaming plays from an influence perspective, from a connection perspective, we can't understate the importance of it. So, any Fortnite players in the room? No? One? I saw this half hand raised back there. I'm like, hey, it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. It's okay. Own it. I love it. So there are 125 million people playing Fortnite right now. Recently, they held a concert in-game. What does the average concert venue hold? 50,000 people, maybe? Big venue? 10 million concurrent users were watching Marshmello play EDM music within a game. 10 million. Thinking about the role sponsorship plays, thinking about what the expectations are for access. So again, it's just another way in which we're shifting. That leads straight into music. Gen Z spends 50 minutes with music. And the number one use case is with smart speakers. And even how they consume music is shifting and changing. Anyone heard of Dash Radio? Dash, yes? All right. Dash has about 10 million users right now, but it's all celebrity curated stations. So it's this idea of influence has shifted. It's no longer coming from Hollywood. It's coming from streamers. It's coming from influencers. It's coming from core celebrities that really connect. And there's this continual overlap between the three. So there's an expectation of control around the content they watch, the games they play, and the music they listen to. And this leads us to where the lens is life. This is one of the biggest shifts. It's not just about the web browser. That's not the starting point for Gen Z. The starting point is the camera. The camera is the home screen for Gen Z. So as we begin to get into this, 69% of Gen Z has their own YouTube channel. 69%. 66% view the camera as a platform. 83% have used augmented reality filters. So again, it's sometimes the use of technology sometimes starts in fun, entertaining ways, but then the expectation associated with that continues to grow. For me, I look at the camera as a capture device, right? I look at it, I point, I click, I shoot. By the way, how many of you have taken a selfie in the last 24 hours? It's a safe space, be honest. One. Last 30 minutes, anybody? Yeah? Yeah? All right. 400 million selfies last year. So communication is also shifting and changing too. My daughter will not have a conversation without FaceTime. She doesn't know actually how to call anyone. It's all about, she'll set up a camera, she'll set it up, and it'll just be on. And her friends will be going about their day, and they're there together. It's that idea of presence. So we'll talk about presence a little bit more in the enhanced section. And expression. Why in the world is Apple spending so much on animojis and memojis in terms of advertising? Right? Did you ever stop and think about that? And they just launched sticker packs at Worldwide Developer Conference recently as well to further extend it beyond devices that can't actually do the facial expression capture. So, and it's also about enabling experience. So the camera is becoming a lens by which we're going to continue to interact with the world. So again, it's incredibly important that as you think about connection with consumers, the role that the camera plays. All right, now let's flip that a little bit and talk about third parties. We talked before about how the Apple App Store began to take off. It was through democratization. You have Facebook, Google, Apple, all allowing third-party development now of augmented reality filters, understanding the importance that the camera is going to play to allow for this type of connection. So that's always step one that I look for. Now, the second thing that's happening is, I was recently at Facebook's developer conference, F8. And when Mark Zuckerberg took the stage, beyond the privacy discussion, it was really focusing on this. How many of you have noticed a change in your Facebook feed recently? That it's more focused on groups and local community activities and less about kind of the friends and family connection. That was on purpose. So it was the first major update to Facebook in 5 years. And what's happening is, Facebook wants to shift all of that interaction that you have with friends and family, shift it into private messaging. What they're doing on the back end is they're connecting Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook Messenger to where that becomes the new 2 billion people that they're going to begin delivering their advertising models against. But the key thing to remember here is that private messaging, what actually happened, it happened in 2016. Private messaging surpassed traditional social media in terms of the active users. So people's natural behavior is shifting towards private. So this is a really important piece to understand, and the role that the camera plays here, from co-viewing to creating experiences to actually delivering commerce. So one of the things, we can talk about this idea of shopping and buying. As these experiences evolve, shopping is the active component. That's where people are actively engaged. That's where you're playing with the car, you're looking at how this potentially can fit. Buying is just the action of buying. So the role that the camera is going to play moving forward, even in terms of how people shop, how they interact, and what their expectations are of your company, it's changing dramatically. Here's an example of Sephora. And this is how CRM is also evolving as well. What you're seeing now is that you're seeing advertising that can go directly into Facebook Messenger. You can progressively profile an individual through that aspect. But again, here the camera is being used to try on and test the product. So that's the expectation. The camera is also a bridge to intelligence. So you can see again how this simple utility of the camera now is beginning to shift. You start aligning the camera with computer vision. Computer vision is essentially the ability to take and pull high-dimensional elements from your environment. And it's a form of AI, and we'll talk more about computer vision. But here, what you can see is you can take something simple as a menu and begin to enhance that experience for the end user, all through the lens of the device. So this is all happening today. So the camera is a bridge to intelligence. So that's the first step. When you think about empower, think about the role of the camera. Think about that the lens is life. Think about the impact that Gen Z is going to potentially have on your business, but also the expectation around technology. All right, now we're going to talk about exponential. And I love robots. You saw that earlier from Star Wars. So we're going to get into robots here a little bit. So who likes Pixar movies? Yeah? Everybody? Yeah? Who's heard of the Pixar Theory? Anyone? A little half, all right, hand in the back. The Pixar Theory states that every single Pixar movie happens on a single timeline, from the beginning of time all the way through to the end, which is Monsters, Inc. And it kind of shows the rise and fall of humanity, where AI is actually inserted into this process, and this whole just expanded universe. It's really kind of cool. So we're going to focus in on The Incredibles for just a minute. So, because The Incredibles movie is the first one that actually introduced the idea of artificial intelligence into the Pixar theory with the Omnidroid. So when most people think about AI, we think about it through the lens of popular entertainment. We think about Terminator and Skynet. We think about the machines from The Matrix. We think about Ultron from the Avengers and this kind of hostile takeover. And how many people have not seen Incredibles 2? This is like a YouTube video. I'm going to give the little like spoiler warning like right now. I'm going to just, if you don't want to hear it, like close your ears for the next like 20 seconds. It'll be okay. But the master plan, it's not about a hostile takeover. What it's actually about, and I've covered the eyes of the innocent here just so that you can, that we're good. It's about ease and convenience. Ease and convenience is the #1 reason across all generational cohorts of why people would adopt AI-based systems or assistants to enhance their everyday life, from Gen Z all the way to boomers. So it was just phenomenal how crystal clear it was that ease and convenience were the key. So to get through to ease and convenience, we're going to talk about 4 core areas. We've touched on the Pixar theory. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into AI. Then we're going to talk about assistance and ultimately net out at the Proxy Web. The Proxy Web is where artificial intelligence, each one of us has our own virtual assistant that understands our preference centers, and that's what's curating experiences around the world around us to guide us on a specific path or to help deliver ease and convenience for our lives. All right. So at this point in time, everybody realizes that from a media perspective, AI is everywhere. I was at CES earlier this year, and it was in hearing aids. There was machine learning enabled moving boxes. So at this point, you know, the proliferation of AI, maybe it's jumped the shark a little bit, but it's everywhere. But my favorite example of AI is on this slide here. This is Numi. This is an AI enabled toilet. Yes, oh yes, that's right. So I love the tagline on this. The tagline is, it's somewhere between luxury and excess. Cool, yeah. I don't know if I need an Amazon Alexa enabled toilet, but there you go. But in all seriousness, there are 3 types of AI. There's artificial narrow intelligence. Think about Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant. There's artificial general intelligence. That's where a system is going to have human level intelligence and be able to interact with us contextually. And the third area, obviously, is super AI. So super AI is essentially this idea of the collective, and this is where we start getting into the expectations that people have around entertainment. But me, well, actually, I look at this through the lens, though, of 5 levels of autonomy as we think about the adoption of AI across our lives. So the first being chatbots, delivering some type of simple utility through Messenger, like we talked about. The second is through voice-enabled assistants. There are going to be about 8 billion voice-enabled assistants by 2023. The third is around digital humans. So there's actually a lot of work that's happening right now, and this is a company called Soul Machines. So we'll touch on a little bit on the role of digital humans. There is the physical robot, where there's this idea of emotive robotics, where it can interact with you, read your facial expressions, interact with you, and ultimately Westworld, right? We have any Westworld fans here? Yeah? Yeah, a couple? All right. So for me, I'm a big believer in the idea of intelligence augmentation. that a lot of these systems are going to take and enhance our lives. It's less about, again, this idea of hostile takeover, and it's more about how AI is going to ease our lives and technology becomes invisible. And again, our environment adapts to us versus us adapting to it. So right now, we're actually in this golden age of AI. And there are three primary reasons why. The first is the cost of graphical processing units obviously has gone down significantly. So that's a given, that's a hardware component. The second, and probably most important to each of you, is the fact that data is oil for AI. That is the primary element that's required to train models, whether you're doing self-learning or not, or, excuse me. And then the third element is around machine and deep learning. It's the advancement of algorithms. That's where I've spent a lot of my personal time over the last 3 to 4 years, is really getting deep on the machine learning side. And machine learning, again, is just human-coded algorithms, so that you're kind of weighting the data sets as they're kind of coming through. Deep learning is actual systems that are actually able to self-train themselves. But when we think about how do you then begin aligning this for your organization, it really starts with actionable data assets. So I cannot reiterate enough. I've been in so many meetings with organizations to where there are silos of different types of structured data, first-party data, unstructured data, but then actually being able to align that and drive that to basically, whether it's fueling innovation, whether it's fueling growth, whether it's fueling retention, acquisition, win-back, whatever it is, that's the foundation where it has to start. And then ultimately, I'm also looking at where are the triggers? Where are the predictive APIs? Where are the things? Those are the elements that are going to allow for artificial intelligence to advance forward. Now, we're going to talk about voice. We're going to talk about vision. We're going to talk about touch. We're going to talk about the first 3 levels of autonomy that we discussed previously. And the first is conversational experiences. How many of your organizations right now have launched some type of chatbot as a customer service tool or anything? I see one hand in the room. Okay, backing it up for just a second. Everybody saw the announcement about the future is private, right? And that's where we're going, this idea of messenger, chatbot, conversational. Consumers have an expectation. Millennials, 70% of millennials expect to be able to have a conversation with your brand 24 hours a day in an asynchronous manner. That means outside of customer service hours, being able to drive. Again, it's about control. So understanding the role that conversational experiences play in how you connect with consumers, I don't care if it's B2B, B2C, B2E. It's incredibly important to have a strategy that at least that's the foundational piece. Because what's happening is experiences are evolving beyond desktop and mobile. Search is evolving, everything's evolving, and in order to be discoverable across all of those areas, it's incredibly important to understand the role that your organization is going to play in each of these categories and areas. And that's just the baseline. Right now, 90 million people are using voice assistants each month. So how many are using voice-based assistants right now in the crowd? Yeah? When I asked this question a few years ago, hardly anybody raised their hand. Now obviously it's 90 million. When you start thinking about the smart speaker market, because I do delineate between the two. There's a difference between a smart speaker, a smart display, and a virtual assistant in your pocket, like Siri. So here we've got about 45 million people that are interacting with smart speakers on a regular basis. So within the smart speakers, you have skills, you have actions, you have different ways in which people can connect with your organization. And even in the car, this is the one that really shocked me. 77 million people are using voice-based assistants in the car right now as well. So at all stages, whether you're at home, whether you're in the car, whether you're wherever you are, you're always connected. So here's where we're going back to Apple versus Google versus Amazon. Apple wants to keep native applications relevant. So if you're an organization that's created an app, and you're reliant on that application to connect with consumers, great. Apple's trying to further enable that through what's called shortcuts. So what a shortcut is a voice-based command that can link directly into your native application. So that's where Apple's trying to keep apps as relevant as possible. But when you start talking about Amazon, and you start talking about Alexa voice services, that's a closed ecosystem, okay? So within Alexa, there are about 70,000 skills that are available right now. And the expectation of convenience and wrapping it within the Amazon ecosystem and controlling that is what this is all about. The one that I'm really interested in is Google. Google is building everything on top of their Google Knowledge Graph. That means all of the information that you have across everything is from search to assistant to whatever else, it's all there, and it's powering these experiences across modalities. So what we're seeing here, this is an idea of how Google Assistant is evolving. It's now this app concierge service. This is drive mode now in Assistant. What it's doing is it's taking the most relevant information from your life and putting it in a way that's easily discoverable, so it knows when you're driving that it can deliver that information. Again, it's this leaning towards ease and convenience. And the even more interesting thing is, I was at Google's developer conference I/O recently, and they launched this, and this blew me away. So this is Google Assistant actually reserving a car on your behalf, going through the entire process, from your preferences to your selection to your trip details down to the car seat. It's all happening on your behalf. Because Google's idea is they want to have the assistant be your preference center and be able to execute specific actions, again, ease and convenience. So this is leading to this idea of what I call the proxy web. Over time, as our assistants become more ingrained with our lives, understand our preferences. So for instance, if I wanted to have coffee with my friend Terry there, we would essentially, my virtual assistant would work with his. It would figure out the ideal location, and everything from routing traffic to understanding order to where we can just focus on the interaction, but the proxy is actually driving a lot of that. And here's where it gets really interesting, and where most organizations I talk to aren't thinking about this. Most organizations focus on consumer-centric marketing. The consumer's in the center, that's who we're going to market to. We're quickly coming to a time where we're not only going to be marketing to consumers, we're going to be marketing to algorithms. And they're two incredibly different things when it comes to preference centers and understanding how to influence. You can't emotionally influence AI. So how do you then maintain this idea of discovery across both, and how do you continue to connect in a highly, highly fragmented world? And the third element around autonomy, again, is digital humans. So this, again, is soul machines. There are a lot of financial institutions right now that are testing digital humans as their ideal way of interacting with consumers. So what actually ends up happening is 69% of people actually prefer interacting with a digital human to interact with. They can read your facial expressions based on your camera and react to that. So it's this kind of idea of this emotive technology. Some may think, hey, this is kind of cool. Some may think this is kind of creepy. I'll leave it up to you. We can talk about that post. All right, so that's exponential. We're moving from this time of the Internet of Things to autonomous things. And as an organization, as you think about the future and as you think about innovation and you think about connecting with consumers, it's incredibly important to, again, understand, have a strong foundation of your core data assets. Then how are you going to align across these different levels of autonomy to actually connect with consumers? All right, the third area we're going to talk about is enhanced. Enhanced is all about physical and digital reality. Okay, love The Matrix. This is the 20-year anniversary of the film. In fact, I love it so much. This is an actual shot of my office yesterday. This is my home office. So yeah, it's a little bit, I'm watching the machines, red pill, blue pill, I know Kung Fu, all of that. So yes, that's the home. My wife just shakes her head. She's like, you be you. But as we think about enhanced reality, everybody's talking about extended reality, enhanced reality, augmented reality. It's really leaning towards this idea of simulation. And how many of you are familiar with the simulation theory? Anyone? Great. Simulation theory basically states that we are all living in a simulation. That at this very point in time, we're all part of a broader computer program that's being run, that we're just simulating life. Whether you believe that or not, that is an actual theory that is out there. So we're using that as a basis to kind of connect into what we're talking about here. So enhancing reality to me is really about perception. It's about eliminating that line between reality and simulation. So we're going to talk about 4 core areas here. We're going to talk about presence, we're going to talk about computer vision, we're going to talk about digital twins, and we're going to talk about synthetic reality. Let's talk about presence. How many of you own a portal device from Facebook? Anyone? Smart display, something like that. Great. Woo. All right. So one of the things that a lot of organizations are trying to do while they're launching this hardware, it's about creating an emotional connection through technology with friends and family. It's about being together through technology. How many in the room have tried a virtual reality headset in the last year? Yeah? 171 million people across the globe right now are using virtual reality, but it's not in the way that you think. Most people associate virtual reality with gaming. Gaming is actually one of the smaller use cases actually being used by virtual reality. What you actually see is people are extending their social experiences through 360-degree video, co-viewing of actual content together through the headset. It's another way to drive presence. So it's really interesting. Facebook just launched their Save to VR function here recently as well. And co-viewing. Co-viewing is something that Google's really focused on. Obviously Google owns YouTube, so there's a vested interest in making sure that people can connect, whether in the real world or whether virtually. You have your avatar, you can talk to each other while you're all watching the same video. So but the key thing that I'm really looking at, that's presence. That is trying to empower consumers to connect. From a business perspective and an innovation perspective, I'm really interested in the application of computer vision. Again, that's high-dimensional elements driven by AI to help drive decisioning. And as we think about the role that computer vision plays, even in search, how many of you are executing search strategies right now? Should be pretty much everybody. All right. What you're actually seeing is that within Google search results, across any industry type, you'll be able to view three-dimensional elements and place them wherever you are to further enhance search. So here, it's that alignment of computer vision using the camera as that connection point, and there it is. You've got muscle flexion on display. If I had this, like whenever I was in school, kids today are so lucky. And the other piece, again, it's about visual context. It's about aligning the camera and computer vision with virtual assistants. You can begin to see, again, it's this convergence, how everything is coming together. And even from a personalized experience perspective, you can look at this. You've got a Pepper robot that's actually taking and recognizing an individual as she walks into a store via computer vision. There's data, there's loyalty data about this individual, an understanding of the type of recommendations that may be relevant for her. And then ultimately, a lot of this is kind of kept and maintained as well. But it's this seamless connection of ease and convenience. And then we're going to talk a little bit about spatial computing. Spatial computing is basically using the world and environment around you as a medium for interaction. So this is the path to simulation. Not this in particular, which is a fun little, You can't have a presentation around augmented reality without having a rainbow spitting building there through Snapchat. Fun fact, 70 million people a day use Snapchat filters, 250 million of them actually share the content out. So again, this expectation of the camera for an expression platform is key. But what I'm actually interested in is how can we use the camera to further enhance physical product? So this is Vuzix. I saw them. This is our third year at CES. You're actually able to take and look at a physical product, create an experience. I can interact with that, whether that was on television, on pack, wherever that was. So again, this idea of using some type of form factor. And the interesting piece here is that Gen Z and millennials are the most open to a glasses or a contact form factor, period. Here, a simple print piece, a business card that is enhanced. This is all delivered just simply through Apple's iOS. We have more computing power in our hands right now than whenever we landed on the moon in the 60s. So this is all just happening through the operating system. I launched AR-based experiences with Volkswagen back in 2011, and it was hard. It was very hard. Through the application, the animation engine, now it can simply be done through the camera lens. It's amazing. And web-based AR. This is the other thing here too, using the camera as a lens to further enhance and showcase and demonstrate your products and services. Mixed reality, again, this is the ability to take and interact spatially with elements. And you can see the photorealism here in this. And as we talked about, whether it's the singularity, where this connection of individuals and technology, this idea of photorealism and simulation is incredibly important and key to that. And as we begin to go towards this idea of simulation, This is all about volumetric and spatial capture. We have to capture the world around us in order to simulate that world. So this was at South by Southwest. There's a lot of technology right now taking and capturing and basically spatially aligning three-dimensional objects. And the role location and connectivity will play as we get to 5G and edge computing is going to be incredibly key. And ultimately, we're leaning towards this idea of digital twins. Digital twins in the industrial space simply means that you're taking and replicating a physical system digitally. So for us, from a consumer experience perspective, as we think about how this is evolving, this is a physical store that's been recreated digitally with contextual hotspots. What I see happening, and it's happening very quickly, we're moving towards a time where we'll have indoor autonomous mapping. The mapping will be done. We will map everything. And when that point happens, we'll be able to align the virtual assistants with the mapped infrastructures to deliver personal experiences. And I'll give you an example. I love Funko Pops, the little pop culture collectible things. Anybody else in here like Funko Pops? It's okay, we talked about passion. Safe space, yes, thank you. One in the back. So each time that there's a Star Wars movie, Target goes really big with Star Wars. They plaster the store with it. In this instance, I could walk into a Target. My virtual assistant basically tells me that there's an exclusive Funko Pop at Target here, and all of that is virtually rendered for me that I can go directly in. So it's this idea that simulation, personalized experiences in store being driven and curated by artificial intelligence systems is how we're going to interact with our world. And ultimately it leads to this, which is synthetic reality, that everything within our world is essentially a digital overlay. So how we're going to get to this point, there's a lot of research, a lot of patents right now around smart contacts. So to me, that's probably going to be the path forward. There's also a lot of focus and energy behind smart glasses as well. And you can't have a discussion about the future without a cat. So there's the official obligatory cat placement in the video here. But you can see this kind of curated personal experience that's playing out on the screen. You get your fun little avatar dog going through and shopping and personalized advertising, et cetera. But to me, the one piece that's missing is touch. So we talked about voice, vision, and touch. So there we go with that. And ultimately, gesture-based interfaces is one of the kind of key things that we're looking at here as well. And ultimately, hyperreality. If you haven't tried the Void yet, highly recommend it. So, all right. And finally, mental and physical. So I'm actually controlling the game with my brain. This is really funny. The young lady who was actually driving the experience was telling me to go faster, go faster. I'm like, I'm trying. But it's actually mental with a physical steering wheel. So again, designing experiences beyond just that is incredibly important. So how do we evolve? How do we move forward? How are we going to drive this forward? It's already happening. You're going to see the assistant move to the center of the operating system. Remember, we were talking about Apple and we were talking about Google. Google is putting the assistant in the center of the hardware right now. That's what this example is. That's how we begin to evolve. Everything becomes a scene. It's where it's not about a native application. It's about the stitching together of different experiences to deliver a personal experience for you. That's what's happening right now in real time. When is this going to happen? 2028. That's when we're going to hit multimodal at scale. That's voice, vision, and touch. Across all of my research, looking at the exponential rates of change of technology, where we currently are, we're less than 10 years away from multimodal at scale. And by 2038, photorealism at scale. All right, we're wrapping up here. So again, it's about voice, vision, and touch. It's about the camera as an intelligent experience delivery system. And it's understanding and designing for the different levels of autonomy that are out there and understanding how you can basically manage innovation through that. And here's the kind of actionable takeaways for you. There are 4. So I teach at SMU. I teach a lot of marketing-related courses. And this is the new 4 Ps. Plan, predictive, proxy, pervasive. As you think about designing experiences. Plan is about data. This is about structured data and understanding how to align experiences that transcend both desktop into smart display, et cetera. There are ways in which you can do data markup that gets you discoverable across both. The second is around predictive APIs. The third is around understanding the proxy web is coming. The fourth is around pervasive experiences, designing beyond desktop and mobile to voice, vision, and touch. All right. So that is the evolution of experience. And so now we've left a little bit of time. I wanted to get through that so we can make sure to get to questions. So, questions. All right, I think that is it, but thank you. I'll be around for a little bit to answer any additional questions, but thank you very much. I really appreciate it.